Hi, good afternoon. Today is May 12th, 2026, and it is 3:40 p.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguirre-Marcano, and I'm recording this declaration at my office, um, located at the 2302 Britton Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas, 77494. And this property is located 300 feet away from the residence of Mr. Robert Mueller, who is a former director of the FBI, and that is relevant to this conversation. Give me just a second because I want to record on the other. Yes. So this would be declaration 136. This is going to be a short declaration because I need to go out. But it's going to have basically a couple of things. One are legal topics. Because now that I started executing the strategy that I mentioned, I think I mentioned about, I kind of roughly mentioned something about a strategy maybe um, around a month ago or 2 weeks ago, I don't know. But I never really got into details because I didn't want to give them any any advantages, right? But anyhow, I started executing, and I've been executing for a few days now. So I want to tell you a little bit about that because they already started blocking what I'm doing. And so I'm going to tell you what I did in case, because when I do these things, they get desperate. And when they get desperate, sometimes they lose the filter, right? Like they go all the way. So if they harm me physically or something, cause an accident, like another traffic crash or something like that, so I cannot, file the documents tomorrow, then, like at least people would know what happened, right? So I'll tell you where the documents are, so you can, get them from there. Um, so that's the situation, right? Let me yes. So before getting into the thing with the documents, so let me give you a brief description of the situation, right? So basically, over the last few months, I developed a technology. I call it the legal vaccine, which is a distributed system that allows me to produce legal files. Okay. And of course, I'm going to go deep into details on how it works, but I've been using that for almost, I don't know, 9 months, something like that, 8 months, I don't know. I had to develop that to be able to respond to, their legal attacks on different courts without having to engage with an attorney. Because the times that I've tried in the past, in the last, not even this year, but like over the last few years, the times that I've tried to engage with an attorney, like hire an attorney, they compromise it. Like the attorney works for them, right? So the attorney gives me bad advice, makes mistakes on purpose, things like that. Right? And this has happened in a couple of cases. So I know that I cannot, hire an attorney in Forbes County to help me because the attorney will be working for them, right? So I had to develop the technology, and I did develop it, and I've been using that for months. Uh, but like as everything, right? Like with technology, there are certain limitations. I mean, it's very sophisticated. It produces very advanced strategies. It's not just to produce documents; it really produces strategies. But it is, you know, it is no match for a sophisticated, trained human mind, right? Like if the level of um, I guess the strategic complexity in the thinking of the system is not at the same level of somebody who is a legal strategist, for example, high level, right? It would probably beat, I would say, 90% of the law firms, right? But there's probably a top 10%, top tier, that it would not beat, right? And it does things like parameterize simulations, and I can hypertune the parameters and things like that to but because we've been stuck in this situation, right? I mean, I'm talking about the Adams law firm, Terry Adams and his team, and um, the trial courts, and and the situation seems to be stuck. Like they don't seems to be a stalemate in a way, right? But they keep harassing me with like legal filings and things. So, to give you the short story, like a month ago, I think I asked this person from the Venezuelan army that passes me information and helps me with this. Um, I call him the informant, but it's really, I would think at this point, I think more of him as a benefactor, right? Because and you'll see what I say this, right? Um, so anyhow, I asked him like a month ago, I don't recall exactly when, but a few weeks ago, if he could help me by seeing if he could find a legal team or the strategies that could help me design a strategy, not to draft the documents because I can do that, but to design the strategy on how to get rid of this, right? Of this harassment with the legal courts in Foreign County. So anyhow, he did that, and he gave me basically a design, right? And what I received was really, it wasn't documents. It was really um, like a blueprint, right, for how to uh, you proceed, like how to like what a strategy, basically legal strategy, right? And then with that, I programmed the legal vaccine pipeline that I have it running right now because they're blocking me in the first court of appeals. Um, so basically, I used that as an input, right, to tune and program my system to execute or to not execute that strategy, but like to start building from that strategy, like taking that strategy as a starting point. Sorry, one second. And so that's what I've been doing, right? So first, let me tell you that in case I run short of time, I can still do the things that run the errands that I need to run, and like the information is still out, right? So the idea is the following. I'm going to give you just a strategy right away, right? So the idea is the following. I don't know if you recall, like a couple of demos ago, I mentioned that I wrote an article for law journals, and in that article, I mentioned that. I mentioned that in that article, I identified that the main weapon of attack, like this is common to all these harassment with all the courts that they're doing, right? Is so it all begins with a defective or an inexistent service. That's how it begins. And with that, they create void orders. And they're void because if you don't serve correctly the person or the entity that you're suing, that everything that happens after that is void. But with that, they create void orders. And because the service is either inexistent or defective, that makes it impossible for the person being harassed or the entity being harassed to respond. Because, well, if it's inexistent, then you don't even know they're entering those orders, right? Like this happens a lot in the 387 court. Like, for example, when they signed that order on October 15, the temporary orders, which are the ones that strip all my parental rights and basically have my son kidnapped, when they issued that order, they didn't serve it to me. Of course, I'm a pro se litigant. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't know that at that time. Right? I know it now because I had to learn all this, right? But at that point in October of last year, I didn't know that there is a rule in the Texas uh, Code of Civil, Texas Rule of Civil Procedure, the Rule 103, that says that they're obligated to serve the orders and the notices to the pro se litigants physically. They cannot like send an email, right? Because I'm pro se, I'm not a lawyer, right? But they didn't do that, right? They didn't send, they didn't even send it electronic, right? I didn't know the order existed. I saw it in the docket, but um, they didn't send it. And the reason they don't send it is because if I have it, I can appeal it. And if I can appeal it, I can show that it's an abuse, right? It has no basis, right? So what they do is that they create the order in that way, they don't serve it, and they create a separate order that is more, I guess, reasonable, right? But it's enforceable. And it's properly formatted and everything. And they insert it in the docket, but they hide it. So there is a docket entry, an index that is missing, right? This is the common thread on all these cases. The order does not show up in the docket. So they enter a void order, right, to harass you, and then they create another order alternative, and which is it's illegal. Like there should be only one version of the order, but they have two or more versions of the order, and they have one version that it appears in the docket, but it's not served, and the other versions don't appear in the docket, and of course are also not served. So if the authorities come investigating, what they will do is that they will show authorities one of the versions that is hidden, that is designed to comply with what the authorities will want to see. You see? If the target appeals, saying anything that they heard verbally in that hearing, if it happened, then they will show the other version of the order that doesn't correspond to what the target is saying, and the Court of Appeals would think this person is crazy, and that is precisely what they're saying in the order, right? So the appeal gets dismissed. And so that's but this is of course fraud. This is multiple. What I'm describing, this procedure involves multiple counts of fraud, of wire fraud, really, using the electronic court record system of the court to harass a person, right? Like to kidnap a child, like in this case. But you see this, right? And my system is designed to attack legal situations individually, right? And this is where this insight from these people that this Venezuelan informant / benefactor, put to work and gave me the output. I don't know who they are, and I don't even know his name, but he gave me the output. That was the missing piece, right? That my system was not able to produce. The missing piece is that this thing that they're doing is a distributed attack. It's a distributed attack because they're doing exactly the same thing using in multiple different courts, in this case in Fort Bend County, but they do the same to everybody, right? Depending on how much they want to harass a person. Like if it's like harassment, they will do one case. But if in a case like this, where I have the database of the crypto payments and I reverse engineer the database of the target to photographer relationships, then they have to go all the way. Right? So they create multiple cases, as many as they can. So it's a distributed attack, you see. But my system, my legal vaccine, fights individual orders. That's the problem, right? So this will never defeat that, right? Because it's fighting things individually. What they're doing is a coordinated thing across different courts and different judges and different authorities, right? I mean, how can you fight individual orders when all these orders are coordinated in a way to create harm to a single individual, right? So it's a many-to-one relationship in respects to the courts and the attorneys and judges that are doing this to the target. So the target cannot be responding individually to the individual harassment orders, right? It's not reasonable, right? But of course, my system doesn't have this understanding. And this is what I'm telling you, that sometimes, doesn't matter how sophisticated the system is, you need a human mind, right? To be able to get this insight and feed it into the machine. And that's exactly what happened. So when the informant gives me this brief, I see the solution, right? I mean, I see, and I'm able to codify this into the machine, right? The solution is to create a distributed appeal. I mean, appeal all these orders, because all these orders are appealable because they were never served, right? And this is visible in the docket. I mean, this is procedural, and an appeal based on a procedural defect, right? This doesn't even have to get into the details of, whether the person is crazy, or whether the child was kidnapped or not, or whether, like, none of those conversations even have to be had. The only question here is whether they served the order or not. And this is visible in the docket because if they had served the order, there would be a receipt of service next to the order, following the order. It cannot be anywhere. It has to be right after the order, right? They issue the order, they enter into the docket, they have to serve it. And there has to be the receipt enter into the docket as well. None of that is present, right? And I have no shortage of orders to appeal. I can appeal. They've done this so many times that I have basically a lot of ammunition to do this, right? But of course, I'm not gonna I started small. I started by 5 orders, so I picked. I mean, not me. A combination of the strategy that I received, and I see the suggestions, and I picked some of them, right? So there's 3 orders in the 387 court. Docket 89, which is the temporary orders that stripped all my parental rights, right, without any valid reason. That's docket 89, docket index 89 on the 387 court. So to give an idea, right? Before, my system was appealing this order based on that they were signed when there was a motion to recuse, which is a valid thing, right? But that would be getting into the substance of the issue. This is even easier to appeal because this is getting into a procedural defect. They didn't serve the order, right? So they have no, an appellate judge that sees this have to reverse this order, right, immediately. So that, right? So the index 39. Then the index 138, I think, is the other one we picked. That one was for motion for additional temporary orders. So at some point, Troy Pickett, after I think was in January or something like that, he started on a campaign saying that I was not complying with the temporary orders that they never served, right, and are void for that reason. And then he asked for additional temporary orders, right? But of course, the basis for that is that I was supposedly not complying with paying the rent of the other party, which is because that was supposedly in the temporary orders, right, that they never served. But you see that this makes this order also void, because the argument of that order was that I wasn't complying with the orders that are void. So it's a chain of voidness, basically, of all these orders, right? It is also void because it was also not served, right? So that's the strongest reason that it was not served, because it's a procedural defect. We don't even have to discuss whether. But this order is worse. It's void for two different reasons. And then after I did not comply with that, because they didn't serve it to me, and because it's an abuse, right? It's void. Then he filed for a motion for contempt of court, right, to put me in jail, or to freeze my bank account, whatever, right? And it's the same. That was not served according to the, and they cannot serve it again, because if they serve it, I would have a physical copy, and if I have a physical copy, I can take it to the DOJ, right? And they, of course, will get in trouble. So they can't give me proof of the crime. That's why they can't serve me any of these orders physically. They could send me an email, because then they can change the content in the document. Right? The electronic record is easy to manipulate, but if I have a physical copy stamped by the clerk, they can manipulate it because I have it. So that's the whole thing about not serving the order, that not giving evidence of the crime to the other party. Right? So anyhow, I appealed these three orders, and also the one on the traffic court, where there was a I filed a motion to recuse, which was denied, but it doesn't appear in the docket. The same thing, right? The motion to recuse appears, but the order denying it doesn't appear. And this is so I cannot see who signed, right? And here I'm not going to give more details, but I have to tell you, like, my benefactor passed me a lot of information that it's very delicate. And I'm telling you this to the network. Be careful what you do, because I'm going to act on that. If you keep this up, I'm going to push forward. So I recommend that you start rolling this back immediately, if I were you. And so in that appeal that I filed, I think it was number 5. I'm saying this to the network because they know what I'm talking about, right? In that appeal, I think it's number 4, right? Yeah, there is a person, right, that could be strange. Look at that. How could I possibly know that? So ask yourself that question. So anyhow, so so I picked that one as well, right? So because they hit the order, and it's worse than that. But let's just start by that. And they didn't serve it to me, right? So the same thing. It's the same TTP. It's the same procedure for harassing a person with the courts. And then the 5th one is the one on the 268th court, the one where Phil Denning and the HOA of Lake Point Estates, where Robert Mueller lives, is harassing me by proxy, by harassing my company, right? What they did, they sued the company, but they didn't serve the company in Delaware as they should have. They served me personally, right? To then find me personally in contempt. But that makes the service defective. That service is defective. And therefore, the order that they entered, like in, I think it was October 2025, it's also void. All these orders are appealable because they're void, because they never served them. And void orders can be appealed anytime. So anyhow, but the core of the strategy is not appealing all these things individually. But I mean, yes, appealing them individually, but concurrently. Filing the appeals at the same time, and putting language in the appeals that makes it clear and explicit that these all 5 appeals are connected. And they are connected by the facts that these courts, these 3 different courts, but all of them in Fort Bend County, all of them enter void orders using exactly the same procedure, meaning the non-service or the defective service to the party being affected by the order, and the party being me, right? So, I mean, if they're doing this in 3 different courts, in 3 different cases, against the same person, using exactly the same technique, this connects them together, right? So there's language in the appeals that says specifically this. In fact, let me show you. I think this is a good point for me to show you this. So I'm gonna open. Okay. Okay, so I don't know if I can do this here. I'll try to show you. Yes. So you see, these are the 5 appeals, right? And so basically the idea is the 5 appeals are connected by 2 things, right? One is the language. So in the number 1, which is like the main appeal that appeals the order 89 of the 387 court. This appeal, I mean, I say that it's the main one because it's the more serious in terms of criminality, right? Like this one strips the parental rights of a U.S. citizen who is also a protected person according to the Refugee Convention of 1951, and is a federal whistleblower with the sole purpose of silencing the whistleblower. I mean, so this is, you know, this is probably 20 years, right, in prison. But so I made this the number 1, right? So, you know, but the second thing that connects them is that because they're, you know, the argument being made is that this is a repeatable process of harassment, and not only repeatable, it's also predictable. For example, when I submitted that article to the law journals in which I described the procedure of harassment, I submitted it 70 minutes exactly before the hearing on the pretrial on the traffic citation on the JP 1.1. And when I went there, they did exactly the same. They showed me an invalid order that is not in the docket. Right? So this means that it's not only repeatable, but it's predictable. Because how could I have written that article before that happened? It's a repeatable thing. And this is important because this means that they are working together, right? I mean, that these actors in these different courts are working in concert. I don't know if you should say concert or concert. So I apologize, but to be honest, I don't know the right pronunciation. But you know, they're working as a team because they're using the same technique. It's a shared technique, right? Against the same person. But the other thing that connects the appeals is this ID. So we put this ID in here, and this ID, so it's a series, right? So AM for my 2 last names, Aguilar Marcano. CA1 is the Court of Appeals 1, the court where I'm not gonna say Chief Justice because, you know, like this is, I was like Terry Adams is the head of the court, right? That's why those letters at the beginning, and then 01 signifies the series in the appeals. But these appeals are connected together, and there's language inside of each appeal that explains that this is basically a distributed appeal. Really, this is what it is. It's not a single appeal; it's a series of appeals that are connected together because they are counteracting a coordinated effort in multiple courts. So here you can see, for example, right? But now, this is the interesting part, right? This is what I want to tell you. In these appeals, it's clear that there is a systematic obstruction of justice applied in all these 3 courts in Fort Bend County, right? So, I mean, the problem is, the reason why the clerk rejected these appeals, I mean, they rejected them yesterday, like minutes after I filed them. The reason why they did that, according to the rejection, is because I need to file a notice of appeal in the trial court, and then the clerk has to sign something. Right? They have to create a case number in a system that then gets picked up by the courts of appeals, and then I can file the brief, right? Which is reasonable. I mean, I understand that, but if the clerk reads these documents, they should understand that precisely what I'm alleging is that the trial courts are obstructing justice. How can I expect that they are going to process my notice of appeal? Maybe they do. I don't know, right? Like, I don't know the situation. Well, I cannot know. I'll tell you more about that in a second. But maybe they will process them. Right? I don't know. But if they don't process them, then I will be in a situation in which I cannot file the appeal. Right? And they've done this before, like with the Supreme Court of Texas. I tried to file a petition for writ of mandamus and a couple of motions, and the clerk refused to file them. Right? And then I filed a petition for writ of mandamus to compel that clerk to file, and then they rejected that. Like they've done this multiple times and in multiple courts. But I want to warn them. I want to take this opportunity to warn them that this time might be different, and I want to tell you why in a second. I already have computed the response to this, and because this is the thing, the computers can see a few steps ahead. So if you do that, I think you're going to get into a dangerous situation. I'm going to tell you more about that in a second. But anyhow, they rejected the appeals because I need to file the notice of appeal on the lower courts, which I suspect they're going to block them, right? To block the possibility of me appealing. They're going to come up with some excuse to say, no, you cannot create these appeals. Right? Which is, it's an ironic situation because it's the court it would be, right? If this is what happens, it would be the court protecting itself. But I imagine that not the court, like the actors of the court protecting themselves by using the court as a shield. So they will be using that court as a sword to harm me and the child, and as a shield to protect themselves. But let's see. I don't want to get ahead, right? Maybe they think this true and they see that it's dangerous. But and I'm going to help you. Like, honestly, I'm going to tell you why this is dangerous, hoping that you, get some reason and you roll this back once and for all. Like, there's no other way. You have to roll this back. But anyhow, so I filed the notice of appeal in the 268 and in the 387th court, and I have yet to file it on the other one. But I'll do that because I want to act on that other thing that right? Anyhow, so that's the situation, right? So if you read this, it's clear. It's very clear that this is a coordinated campaign, right? It's stated in the language of each appeal. So the appeals are connected together, not only by the language but also by the series of the numbers, the IDs. I created these IDs that basically connects them together. Now, those IDs are a weapon. I'm gonna help them out here. I'm gonna tell them, right? So first thing, these IDs make this trackable. So every judiciary officer or quasi-judiciary officer that takes or doesn't take action on each individual instrument, this is traceable. It's traceable who did what. Right? Now, the reason why this distributed appeal is the way to go is because it has certain properties. Like, for example, if I file one appeal with the First Court of Appeals, they can, say that appeal is effective for some reason, right? But if I'm filing 5 that are exactly the same for the same reason and the same appellant, like if they reject them all by supposed defect, it would have to be the same defect. If they start rejecting them for different reasons, this shows that what kind of a standardized procedure is this court applying, right? It shows that they're acting arbitrarily. Now, if they let them through, theoretically, they should be assigned to different panels or different judges because they're different cases and they're different appeals. They're different instruments, separate from each other. I mean, technically speaking, apart from the language and the ID, there are different cases in the Court of Appeals. So they should be processed separately. And they should be assigned to independent panels and independent judges. And these independent judges should have different views. So now they will be faced with a situation in which all these different judges will have to dismiss these 5 appeals for the same reason, right? This would show that they're working together, right? Because they're different cases. These are completely different cases. The order was entered in different times, completely different situations. They can't, all think of the same reason and produce the same rejection or the same denial, I guess. So, the idea is that if one succeeds, all must succeed because it's the same argument, right? The orders are void because they did not serve them. And this is demonstrable just by looking at the docket. There's no need to even talk about what the order says. The question is, did they serve it or not? According to the rules of procedure 103, right? That's the question. One exception could be the 208 because, exception in the sense that it's not the rule 103. The effective service there is because they did not serve the company in Delaware. They served me personally. I'm not the company. I'm not the registered agent of the company. So that's where the defect lies. So it's not the rule 103, it's a different rule, right? But it's the same, it's effective service, right? So the general thing is that the service is defective or inexistent. And as I said, I have no shortage of orders. Like even there are motions to recuse that the orders denying the motion to recuse was not served properly. So I can even go all the way, and I could go back in time. I could go to index number 7. That is not visible, and it wasn't served, right? And that is a dangerous situation. So I recommend really that you roll this back before I get to that point, because if I get to that point, then it's going to be a different conversation then, right? Okay. Yes, but let me tell you why. And so, basically they are rejecting the filings in the first court of appeal. Like the situation right now, I comply today with what the procedure says. I filed the notice of appeals, hoping that they will process it, right? Let's see what happens. But let me tell you what the computer, because I already ran the scenario of what if they don't process it, right? They denied they say we're not going to process this, we're not going to generate the case number, which is what I need to be able to file the brief in the Court of Appeal. If that happens, then what the system thinks the next step will be is to generate. In fact, I already have it generated. I don't have to generate it. I already have it. It's a petition for writ of mandamus to compel the clerks in the lower court to act. But this is dangerous. And let me tell you why. Because now these are 5 appeals, but I can address this with a single petition for writ of mandamus on the first court of appeals. And this petition of writ of mandamus will have, in fact, I think I should show it to you. Should I show it to you? Let me see if I have it here. No, I don't have it here, but the real party in interest, so the real parties in interest in that petition of writ of mandamus would be a combination of Gloria Espina, the state of Texas, and Gloria Espina, the state of Texas, and Phil Denning and the HOA, where Robert Mueller lives. So the 3 entities, right? Gloria Espina, who carries the highest liability because she has had the child kidnapped for 9 months, for a year and a month, right? Using these void court orders, right, as a weapon and shield. But it would put Gloria Espina right next to the HOA of Phil Denning and Robert Mueller, right next to the state of Texas, which has a government, right? So it's nuclear, you see. So I think the best thing to do for you right now, I'm talking to the network, right? And I'm sorry for because but we have to stop dancing this because I have other things to do. I can't be doing this for forever. So I want to get this quickly, right? So it's a dangerous situation, right? To use the clerks in the lower courts to not create the case numbers, right? Which is, I think, is the only path forward, right? For you at this point, right? You have to. That's the only way you can block this, because if it gets the case number and the appeals get filed, then they will have to review the dockets, and there's a screenshots of the dockets that show that these orders were never served. How can they possibly deny these appeals? But that still gives you, I mean, I'm going to give you the bright side. Even if you have to reverse the orders, you can still claim that it was a coincidence, that this wasn't a concerted effort, and that there is no conspiracy, right? And there might be professional sanctions and things like that, but maybe it doesn't get to a RICO case, right? But if you block the thing on the lower courts, and I cannot get the case numbers to go to the appellate court, then I will have to file that petition for writ of mandamus. And then the parties will be together in the same page, right? In the same legal document. So I'll be careful. I think honestly, I think the best thing to do here is to roll this back quickly, like there's no tomorrow. Yes. So with that, I'm gonna place a link that has all the appeals in a zip file together. So in fact, let me see if I can do this right now. Just give me just 1 second to do this quickly, so we get that out of the way. I'm going to compress this. Okay. So I'm going to put it in. Okay, so it's going to be in this bucket called call-mobile-2024, and I'm going to put it in the root of the docket, because these are probably the most important documents so far, right? Let me see that there is nothing. Yeah, so you have even the envelopes, right? So here are the envelopes numbers and the screenshots. Everything is in here, right? That I submitted. So you have not only the instruments, you also have the numbers of the envelopes, the screenshots of the submissions, everything. Everything is in here. Yes. I think I can make it better by giving you the two notices of appeal that I just filed. Sorry. How do I do this? Sorry, 1 second. I have to go back. Yes, May 12th. Okay, I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to compress it again. It's uploading. 1 second. Okay, so this is the path. You can see it here. I'm going to increase the font size so you can see it. So it's this one. Storage.cloud.google.com/KOL-mobile-2024/appeals-file-on-may-11.zip. And I will of course put a link to that in the description of this video. Okay. Now let's shift topics a little bit. Yeah, I'm running out of time, but let's shift topics to another part of the legal strategy is that I'm basically sending notices of potential infringement of my intellectual property. But I'm not sending it to what I'm doing is, and this is it's a bit funny, right? I'll tell you the story because it really, I think it's hilarious. So I started by sending it to the companies, right? Like, and in these notices, I say that it's basically a notice, like it's a legal notice saying, hey, I think you may be infringing. my intellectual property. And here are the patents, the application numbers that I think you may be infringing. And here's the nexus, why I think you may be infringing this or where. And then it has a language at the bottom that says something like, hey, I'm a reasonable person and I'm open to negotiate a license. I can license, and the patent applications that I quote are patents often about things like encryption, depending on the case, right? And these are accurate things. Like, I'm not making this up. Like, they are doing these things, right? So encryption, covert data extraction, exfiltration, things like that, right? Which, I mean, it implies that they are, getting audio from my house and my car, right? Well, anyhow, at the bottom, I added language saying, hey, if, I don't say this explicitly, right? But the idea is, even if you're using this to, steal data from me, I'm willing to license this technology to you. I'm reasonable, right? But as a condition, a non-negotiable condition I have, I give them the condition, straight up. The condition is, I want you to mark the property that is being used to infringe my intellectual property with the patent number. So you have to put the patent number of the patents that you are infringing, that you would be licensed, right? So this would be a condition for licensing the patent, the applications, the technologies to them. My only, not my only, but my main condition, my first condition that is not negotiable is that they put the patent number on the surface of the property that is infringing or that is going to be licensed, right? Or alternatively, my name, right? And it has to be on a space that is no less than 3% of the surface area publicly viewable of the property. So what I'm telling them is, if it's a house, right? If the nexus is a house, you have to put my name on that house, on 3% of the area of the house, my full name, right? And I send these to the general counsels of the companies, right? But then this evolved, right? Because the one I started doing was reporting the agents that this network has deployed next to my properties. But I mean, I sent the notices to their employers. So I don't know if when you were a kid, if you ever did this, right? But that you would get into a fight and then you would go, if you kind of lose the fight, you instead of fighting the person, you would go and accuse them with their father, right? Something like that. So what I do, I send the notice to their employers. Now, this is relevant because the employers are the ones that are financing this person, right? They're paying. I mean, they have a responsibility if the employee is doing something illegal, the employer has a responsibility to investigate. And I'm sending this to the general counsel of that company. And they're big companies. And in some cases, the company is, in some cases, it's corporate housing. The company is the maintainer of the property that is being used to infringe and to steal data and to do these things, right? So, remember, in this notice, I attached the book that in turn has declaration 132, 33, 34, and 35, something like that, right? There is, the general counsel of the company is an attorney. They have a responsibility when they read this to report these crimes against the courts to the authorities and to the administrators of the courts. I'm talking about the secretion of orders with using tele technologies specifically, right? When they read that, they have an obligation to report according to the rule 8.3, right? So it's nuclear, right? And with these, I started, for example, to give some examples, I sent one of these notices to Citgo, right? Who is the employer of Michael Pretty. I sent one notice to US Foods, who is the employer of John Michael next to me. I sent one notice to Fluor Corporation, who is the employer of Gary Gray, right? Who can't see me connect to the internet because he takes a car off the garage to intercept the downlink of the antenna, right? But funny enough, I sent one notice, and this was hilarious, right? It was kind of a sweet, moment, right? I sent one of these to Damon Sachs because, the nexus is Penelope Suarez, right? He employed directly Penelope Suarez for years, and she's friends with her. He's friends with her, and she was, she's a common acquaintance. Let's call it that way, or a shared acquaintance, I guess. And he did the thing with the truck full of equipment on 4th of July 2024, right? But I didn't put that in the notice, right? But I sent him the notice asking him to, not asking him, but telling him that I would be open to give him a license so he could still, keep intercepting the downlink, but he has to put my name on his house. So so anyhow, any attorney that reads these, well, first of all, they should be outraged by the demand of putting my name on the properties, right? I mean, in one case, I sent it to Google, right, to the general counsel of Google, and the Nexus property. Well, the Nexus was Michael Schubert and the building of Google in New York, which is the largest building, I think. Well, maybe not the largest, I don't know. But I can tell you, when it was purchased, it was the largest real estate transaction in the history of New York. Commercial real estate, right? So I'm asking them basically to put my name on the Google building, right? I mean, the general counsel of Google has to be outraged by this and has to read the attachment, right? It's the only logical thing they can do. And when they read the attachment, they will see the declarations, right, that have all these things that they are obligated to at least open an investigation. And I think in general, right, the employers, if they receive this letter, they are obligated to at least open an investigation to see what is that these people might be doing or not might be doing. Like this creates an immediate responsibility, right? So this is nuclear, right? And I've sent many like this, and I have basically, I think I've sent something like, in Lake Point Estates, for example, I've sent like 8. But if you do the math, I still have like 70 bullets left. So, I would recommend you roll this back because, there's still Swisher, Fekovic, like, I can go on and on. Barriere, I think the next in my list is Barriere. So, and, it's pretty important. So, I would say roll it back. It would be my recommendation. And by roll it back, I mean, give me my son back. It's the only solution to this. Anyhow, I also wanted to, well, so let's stop the legal topics for a second. Yeah. And let me transition to a couple of things, right? So, John Giraldo. So, long story, right? But when I saw the thing about, Reynaldo Medina's photography website, let me start by that. Let me tell you that first, because it might be important. I've been doing some thinking on that, on the photography website of Reynaldo Medina, specifically the food page. And it seems to me, and this is observational, right? I might be wrong here, but it seems to me like not only the set of photos is accurate. Like, if you look at those photos, those are the things that I love eating, right? And I know you can say, well, those are things that everybody loves, right? So maybe that's the reason why it looks that way. It could be, right? It could be. But, looking at all things considered, I think the most likely explanation is that is a list of likelihood of items Ronaldo, the target, right, would eat. Now, I have to tell you, in that demo 135, I mentioned that. But after that, I was thinking about this, and I was looking at those pictures and looking at, like thinking about different things. And it seems to me like not only the list, the set is accurate, but the ranking is accurate. So the relative order of the items, and I think the sizes, I can't recall if the sizes are, I was measuring them, but I don't know if I finished it, but let's see, let's do this. One second, please. Okay, so if you go to food, yes. So the size, you see, so that cheeseburger, like, that's probably my favorite food. Like, if I could eat that for every meal for the rest of my life, I would probably do that. and it's the biggest picture, right? And the same with the others. The size is, I think, also encodes likelihood. So this led me to think two things, right? The most obvious one is that this is probably not only a list, this is really an indexing document. That this is what it is. It's a document in an index. So what this is something that they can update with certain frequency over time, okay? When things change, because, you know, for example, people could develop a condition. Somebody could develop a condition, could become allergic to something, and then the item would be out of the list. So they need to be able to update this, right, with certain frequency. But this also led me to think that maybe this is more systematized than I thought, because I thought this would be gathered with human intelligence, right? Like they would ask Penelope or Gloria or, you know, what is that he eats, and, you know, make a list of the things that he likes. I thought, right? But maybe what they're doing really is getting the receipts from the points of sale from companies like Olo, for example, right? In a systematic way, ingesting them into an indexing pipeline, running a MapReduce with frequency of purchase, and then, you know, computing scores by frequency, and the frequency gives you the likelihood, right? And the likelihood, you can proxy that to a score, that then you can proxy to a size or a placement in this chart, right, in this page. So I think this is really not only a list, this is a ranked set. This is what this is. So that would be what I would think, right? That's what I would do it that way. Now, but speaking of that, let me tell you also that the PHP agency, right? So when I saw that, right, and I saw the thing of putting PHP at the beginning of the URL and at the beginning of the page and in the logo, all those things are techniques that reminded me of John Giraldo, or John Giraldo. I don't know how you would pronounce it in English. And I described him before in other terms. I'm not going to do that again. But these are, I mean, these things these techniques that they use here, PHP agency, Rodolfo Vargas, right? You know, like I will call it even a signature. I think, you know, John Giraldo had something to do with this page, and John Giraldo, you know, was for the Venezuelan team, right? Because he was working with Nelson Lara when they took me to New York. And, you know, I'm sorry I'm saying things that require context, but when authorities inevitably get this, I imagine they will see the other declarations, and they will understand the references, right? So when they took me to New York to talk to President Leonel Fernandez, John Giraldo was involved in that cruise. So, you know, it's obvious to me that he's working for the Venezuelan team. And I see this page, and I see the signature of John Giraldo all over the place. But now, what I wanted to tell you is not that really, is that if you read this page, if you really read it, it becomes obvious that this is fake news. I mean, that this page is just the front, right? And you can see this in here, right? I'm going to tell you exactly where. So if you look at this phrase, right, the first sentence in the first paragraph, which is the most important for topicality, right? For the same reasons I explained when I built that pipeline to detect the deceptive title TTP, right? The same idea. The first paragraph and the first two paragraphs are crucial, right? And Google has the same thing, right? That's why they have to put this in the first paragraph. So anyhow, they go and say, both Rodolfo and Ceci have been with PHP for close to 10 years. After reaching MD is managing director, right, which was my title at Goldman Sachs. They began to rise through the PHP ranks. Ranks is an important keyword because it was the main keyword in my website, Key Opinion Leader, keyopinionleaders.com. The slogan of the company was that the company ranked top experts in the world and help you find top experts, right? But ranked. So the topic, the keyword ranked was a very important keyword in that website. That's why they have to inject the keyword rank in here to make that link with keyopinionleaders.com. which is a technology that he was tasked with stealing. Right? And then it goes to say, quickly making their mark. That phrase, making their mark, also appears prominently in the first versions of the Key Opinion Leader website. And earning their spot on the chairman council. Okay. But the reason why this is fake news, and you can see it, is because supposedly Rodolfo Vargas is a co-founder of the PHP agency. Why does a co-founder needs to rise through the ranks? That makes no sense. I mean, if you think about it, right? If you are the co-founder, you are the co-founder of the company. You're already at the top. I mean, you founded the company, right? It's like saying that Larry Page had to rise on the ranks at Google. Like, that makes no sense. He founded the company, right? He gets founders shares, like like it's just but they phrase it that way to inject the keywords that they needed to make the topicality link to me, to make this website be topicality co-clustered by topicality with key opinion leaders, which would make him be co-clustered with me. So right, the main person entity tied to this page, which is Rodolfo, would be co-clustered with the main person entity tied to keyopinionleaders.com, which is Rinaldo Aguiar. And that is the link, right? It's the same thing of matching the fingerprint, but what they're doing here is matching the fingerprint of web pages. In the Rinaldo Medina, they match the fingerprints of the identities that are represented by the images in the website, in the web page. But so here is another flavor of the same, right? But it's a fingerprint matching. You can think about it as, well, in this page, the contacts are those keywords. So the contacts, if you replace, contacts in the Ronaldo Medina example by keywords in the Rodolfo Vargas example, is the same TTP. It's fingerprint matching what they're doing. That's how they are tying the targets to the harassers, by matching the fingerprints. But anyhow, the thing I wanted to tell you is that it's obvious that this first paragraph is fake. I mean, it's fake news, right? And you know who are the experts in fake news, right? You remember, Cambridge Analytica and all that, right? It's the same thing, right? But this led me to ask the informant to check with the technical people that he's in contact with about John Giraldo. And he told me a few things. I'm not gonna say them here, but one of the things that he told me is that he heard from that team that, because I made a mention in the last demo, I think, that I would suspect that the shadow Google that they have is being run on a data center in Finland, the Netherlands. That's what I guess it would be. The informant told me, and he heard this from the team that works with Giraldo, that there's another data center in Germany. So I don't know. I don't know if this is true, right? But I'm getting this information secondhand. So it came from John Giraldo's team to somebody, and at the end it got to me. But it seems like it's possible that there is a Germany data center that has this Bizarro Google running. I don't know. I'm just offering that as a tip. Maybe it works out. Maybe it doesn't work out. So anyhow, with that, I'm gonna close this segment, and I'll thank you for your time, and I'll see you on the next one. Okay, thank you. Bye. Hi, welcome back. This is the second part of the Declaration 136. I was going to go out, but it got to be too late, and I wouldn't arrive on time. So instead of doing that, I'll record this segment, doing the second part of the Declaration 136. So in the previous file, because I was in such a rush trying to make it that I kind of cut corners a little bit. So there was a part in which I was describing that the system already computed, what are the different scenarios of what they could do to block this, right? Because the appeal is so simple, because it's based on a procedural defect at the service stage. So at the first stage in the process of the creation of the order. the order, the temporary orders, right? In the 387th court, for example, that stripped all my parental rights for no reason. Because this is such an early stage in the process, in the legal process of creating this order, this is a trivial appeal. And I said something to the effects in the previous segment that if they block the appeals of even being filed with the first court of appeals, because they have to block it, right? Because the appeal is so simple, there's no reason. I mean, what they cannot dismiss it as moot, as they've done with the petitions of writ of mandamus, for example. Right? Anyhow, I said something like the system already computed multiple paths, right? What they could do, and the most likely path is that they're going to block it in the trial courts by saying that it's not appealable, and that not giving me the case number, right? Or not giving it a case number. So blocking the appeal in the trial court, which is already high liability. I mean, those actors are already, in all the way, right? So one more violation on one less violation is not going to make a difference, right? So maybe that's what they're going to do, right? And I say something to the effect that that's a dangerous situation, because the system already computed what is the most likely path, that is that, and that what's the solution to that, right? And I've done this. I mean, the system already computed the same solution before. Like, this is exactly what the system computed. I'm telling you all this so they can see, I mean, the network, right? So they can see that that I'm not bluffing. Like, we've already gone through this. When you blocked the appeal on the first court of appeals on the federal side, what did the system do? It produced a petition for writ of mandamus to compel the clerk. When you block the motion to the new petition for writ of mandamus in the Supreme Court of Texas around late February 2026, what did the system do? It created a new petition for writ of mandamus to compel the clerk of the same court to file, right? So this is what's going to happen. And it already happened. I already have the instrument, and I'm going to show you the instrument I already have. The system already produced it. I have already the petition for writ of mandamus to file to compel the clerks in the lower courts. And I'm going to show you the document first, so you see that I'm not bluffing. And second, so you have the opportunity to see, before making a decision on your side, what that party's page will look like. Because I look at that party's page, and to me, it looks scary. I mean, if I was you, right? So I want to show you that, so you can see, right? 1 second. So it's like what is it? This one. It's like seeing before buying, right? What I'm offering you here. So this is a not so common opportunity, I would say. So let me see what I can show you. Right. So it's this one. Right? So you see that I already have it here. So if you scroll down, and it has the nature of the case, the issues presented, it has everything, right? But if you see and you can see that it was generated today, right? May 12th. You can see that in the certificate of service that I already, and you see that in the certificate of service are the clerks and the attorneys of all the cases, right? Including the district attorney, right? Of the JP 1.1. But if you go to the identities, right? So this is what looks, I mean, to me, right? If I were you, this looks scary. So you have the real parties of interest. You have Gloria Spina, and it could be more scary. I think I could technically put, Zulema Molero Villamizar. I mean, as an amicus, as I did on the attempt to file on the Supreme Court of Texas. So I can still refine this, right? I still have more things that I can do with this, but like this is good enough. I could have filed this today, right? I mean, if you had blocked it in the saying that you're not going to, let it proceed to appeal, right? With the trial courts. But so this is what it would look like. It would look. I have to tell you, well, you could say, well, we could take the state of Texas out by letting it move to appeal on the JP 101, 1.1, right? But that is not true because that clerk, the clerk of the JP 1.1, already refused to file documents for me, and I have that. I can prove that was the case. So that clerk already obstructed justice. So I can make the point that why would I attempt this when that clerk and the bailiff prevented me from entering the courtroom in the same day. So I don't even need to do that, right? I have to put that in here. And importantly, you will have here the two attorneys from rmbwbh.com that have been working for Phil Denny for over a year, harassing me with those invalid services. Right? And importantly, the incident on April, I can't recall the date, but the incident I'm talking about with the process server, right? I have all that. So it's dangerous because of the state of Texas. This is the most dangerous part. So I don't know, really. I think the most economic solution here is to let it proceed to appeal, let the appeal go through, and then if I make that claim that it was a RICO enterprise, you say no, it was just a coincidence. Right? You had bad luck in 3 different cases, and maybe it will fly. I don't know, right? But I think it's probably the best that you can do. Anyhow, so I'm showing you this so you see that I'm not bluffing. And by this point, I mean, after a year of this, you should know that I don't bluff. When I tell you that I'm going to do something, I do. So, but with that, I'm gonna change topics a little bit. I'm gonna tell you something that I was looking at today. It's kind of a long story. I want to give you the short version of it. Okay. It's already documented in the bucket, like this. But this started because the informant told me. I think it was yesterday. I can't recall if it was yesterday. Yeah, he told me, not today, this morning. He told me that they were listening to what I said or what I did in the house. By listening specifically, he told me the device. He told me that it was a charger, an Apple charger that I have, and it's true. I mean, how could this person in Venezuela know that I had this charger connected to the power outlet in this area where I'm working? Yeah, 3 days ago, I don't know when was it that they were listening, right? But recently they were listening to what I was saying. I said some things and they listened to them. Like that's how I know. And he told me, look at what you have in the because there is a charger, an Apple charger that is bought. I found the charger. It's true. It was plugged into the outlet, and that charger. And this is the reason I'm not telling you this to complain about the bug in the charger, because at this point I know that 95% of things that I have are bugged. But this is interesting because this charger specifically came from a thing called TechStop. TechStop is a type of I don't know how to describe it. It's like a computer repair shop within Google offices. So every Google building, almost in every floor, not every floor, but like most of the floors, if there's many floors in that building, will have a tech stop. The tech stop is basically like a small shop. I don't know how to describe it. It's like a shack. inside of the building, right? Inside of the floor, like on top of on the floor that you are. And it has kind of windows, and you approach the window, and they have all sorts of accessories for your computer, and you can ask for anything you want, and it's free. Well, I'm telling you what I remember from 2018. Maybe this has changed. I don't know. You could take anything from there, right? If you need a charger, if you need a cable, if you need anything, right, you could take it from there, and it's free. You don't have to pay for it because it's a it's a tool for work. It's a work item. So they give them to you. Now, one of these chargers, after I left Google, it was in my backpack. I didn't return, and I still have it. And I was using that charger in I don't know the recent days, and they were listening to what I was saying through this charger. This kind of long story, but this is I think this is important to I want to show you how I came with this idea, how this occurred to me, right? Because it could be, I think it's something important. So anyhow, the charger is bugged, and the charger came from TechStop, meaning from Google. So meaning they inserted the bug really from Google. I mean, well, not Google directly, because these TechStops are not run by Google, are run by an external entity, a subcontractor that runs these shops and buys these things for Google. So when you need a laptop, basically Google, so they create a purchase order that Google approves, and then they fulfill the laptop. I mean, this company, right? And it's all branded as TechStop. And this is internal to Google. Like nobody can get these laptops because they have Google software and stuff. It's standardized for Google engineers. But remember, the charger is bought, right? So somehow my technical, and this charger was from around 2017. I think it was when this charger was given to me in New York. So this was around the time when I was competing with Travis Kalanick, Careo, and WebMD. So this charger came from them, right? Like somebody gave the order to give me this charger. Right? At the very least, right? At the very least, this was targeted to me. It is possible that TechStop is doing this to more people at Google other than me, that they have more targets at Google other than me. This will be like the level 2 of severity of the TechStop situation. The level 3 would be they're doing this to all Google employees systematically at TechStop. I don't know which one is the case. I can tell you that at least in my case, they did it to me. Right? They gave me a bug charge. Okay. That's the first thing that happened, right? Then I remember something that happened when I was employed in 2001. I think this happened in Venezuela when I was employed by PDVSA, Petróleos de Venezuela, the old company. Okay. And I'm not going to go into details into what happened, but something there happened that I understand today that it was a ruse that they did. Right? I'm not going to get into the details here. I'll tell authorities. I'll be transparent. But I know that was a ruse, right? And I'm mentioning this because the ruse involved computers and involved computer systems, right? And it was executed by a company called Intesa. That's the name of the company. INTESA. Intesa. Intesa is a company that provided, and maybe still provides, I don't know, the technology infrastructure to Petróleos de Venezuela, to the oil company of the state in Venezuela. So the setup back in the days was that, I was an engineer, and there were other engineers, right? We were engineers in PDVSA, and Intesa personnel would provide to us equipment, technology. For example, the network connectivity in the offices was done by Intesa. The computers were packaged in a way, right? Like back in the days, I mean, in the 90s, the late 90s even, computer systems were not as, there was no USB as you have today. So today we have the USB is a serial connector, right? And anything, you can connect anything into that, a webcam, you can. Back in the days, in the late 90s, USB didn't exist. So there were, I think, well, maybe the first version of USB maybe existed, right? But many computers, well, the point I want to make is that many computers were not really well packaged together, right? And many things were incompatible. You could buy a graphics card that you put in the computer and didn't work, right? Because it was not compatible with that processor, the driver didn't work, things like that, right? So it was a big problem. The compatibility of peripherals was a headache, right? So what Intesa did is that they packaged these things together into standardized products that basically they provided to the employees of the companies that were their clients. So it was like, and I mean, it was a very good system. Like they had, serial numbers and, SKUs and things like that, right? So there was an SKU that would be like a full computer system for a projects engineer that had this software, this software, this software, and this software pre-installed, and these peripherals is pre-packaged, and everything was already tested. Like but it was guaranteed to work, right? And that was a big thing. So Intesa was the company that provided this service, right, to Petróleos de Venezuela. Right? And remember, I know that they pulled that rules in 2001. That I know it was a rules. Obviously, it was a rules. Right? So it occurred to me, well, what a coincidence that, in two companies that I've worked, there is this setup where there's the main company, and then they subcontract the infrastructure of IT. And this company that does the IT support and infrastructure happens to do something that either harms me, like in the case of TechStop, or could have harmed me, like in the case of Intesa. I mean, it's a coincidence, and these two things happened 20 years apart, right? So I started thinking, well, maybe it's not a coincidence. Maybe this is what they do, right? And then I have to tell you, I remember, the kind of products that Intesa package, and they were very heavy on Microsoft products. So, for example, the email system was Outlook, and it was all, Outlook servers and Exchange servers, I think they were called back then. Um, yeah, Microsoft Exchange, right? That was what they used. And they had things like, I don't know, Lotus, and like, no, not Lotus. Lotus wasn't in the menu. Microsoft Office didn't exist, I think, like at that point. Oh, it did exist. So it was Microsoft Office. Yeah, it was Microsoft Office. It was Windows. It was all Microsoft products, right? So it's interesting. It's interesting that Uncle Bill, was dominating that market already, right? And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful or be overly familiar with, but I call him Uncle Bill because he's the uncle of all of us, right? My adversaries, and he created all of us, right? In one way, I mean, in one way or another, in direct or indirect ways. So anyhow, I see that Uncle Bill was heavy on that, right? On that Intesa thing. In occasions, right? I talked to one of them, and he was telling me about the company, about Intesa, and I was asking him, like, how do you feel working there? Like, do you like what you do? I was trying to kind of learn about his work life, right? Um, and he told me a story that this company was amazing, that, the opportunities of technical growth were amazing, and that this company was a contractor of the State Department. That's what he told me. In Tesla, right? It sounded a little bit weird to me because Tesla doesn't sound like a name, like an American, like an American company name. But so I asked him, and he explained that, well, it wasn't really Intesa, it was the parent company of Intesa. And that's all I remember. I didn't remember the name, but I looked it up today and I found the name. And it's true. The parent company of Intesa, it's a company that provides technology platforms for things like, the army and the Pentagon. Like, so if the government, many branches of the government, if they want to buy a computer system, they order the same process as I'm describing in Google. That means that happened at Google with TechStop. The equivalent to TechStop at Google is SAIC, is the name of the company, SAIC. If somebody needs a computer, the government creates a purchase order. No, sorry, the SAIC creates a purchase order, I imagine, right? And the government approves it, and then they provide the computer. And that's how it works. But you see, like I see it personally, right? I see this, and it seems like a dangerous situation. I mean, I suspect, like, if this was the case, it would be a dangerous situation because it's a company that was under the influence of, Uncle Bill since the 90s, right? And it's a direct door to the computing systems of government employees that are handling sensitive information. So anyhow, I went and looked at the properties, for example, the headquarters of SAIC. I don't know if the pronunciation, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but that company, right, the SAIC. In Houston, Texas, the headquarters is marked in the index. It's marked in the index of Cesaro Cabello. It has the geo features, like it has the buffer zones. It's right in the coast. It's protected by on the north by a huge parking lot, and like it has all the toys. I see it and I recognize what I'm saying. So anyhow, I did what I do. I created one of these notices that I described before. I found an employee of Psych that lives like 300 feet away from Cinco Meadows Dental, which is a front of the Chinese intelligence, passing as dentists. Right? And I created a notice and I sent it to Psych saying, listen, there is possible that your employee, I'm not accusing Psych, I'm saying that it's possible that the employee, I think his name is Daniel something. The notice is in the bucket. I put it in the bucket. He might be infringing my intellectual property. And the nexus is that he's next to this base of the Chinese intelligence that are posing as dentists, right? Cinco Meadows Dental. And I'm not going to go into this, but like I even wrote a chapter in one of my books about them. So, that's how sure I am that they are in it. Right? I'm talking about the dentist, right? So anyhow, but so this led me to call my mom because when these things happen, because this is history of Venezuela from the 90s and the 2000s. This is probably not written anywhere. Right? So I called her because she also used to work for that company as a teacher. She was a teacher. So I called her and I asked her questions about the chronology of these events. Like what happened first. Now I have to tell you, PDVSA wasn't always PDVSA. Before, it was actually 5 companies: Lagoven, Maraven, Corpoven, Bariven, and Intevep. So there were 5 companies that were doing different things. Like there were like 3 of them that were doing exploration and exploitation of resources. There was one which was Intevep that was doing technical research, and Bariven was doing procurement. So what happened is that in January 1998, these companies merged together into a single entity, PDVSA. And at that point, Intesa became, maybe Intesa was involved before. I'm not sure about that. Maybe it was involved before in some capacity. But after that integration, that merge, back then they call it integration, but in English you would say merge. Right? So right after this merge, Intesa became the sole and exclusive provider of infrastructure, technology infrastructure for Petróleos de Venezuela. Which is, it catches my attention because, well, first the chronology of things, and second, the events that happen after, right? Then Chavez comes into power in that December, I think. So 12 months after Chavez gets into power. Dissolved the assembly, changes the constitution, and did all he did, right? But this happened shortly after that merge of the oil companies in Venezuela into one, and the insertion of Intesa, which is controlled by SAIC, as the single provider of technology. Right? So I mean, it's like, I can't avoid seeing. I don't know, right, if there's causation, but um, it's very interesting, right? So it occurred to me to also look if SAIC was the provider of technology of other oil companies, like American oil companies, and the answer is yes, they are. So it's possible, and they have been for many years, even before they got into PDVSA, right? Into Petróleos de Venezuela. So it's possible that this is the mechanism, right? I mean, and one of the most amazing things to see is how they created the aggregator. What I'm trying to say is that I think that this situation of Venezuela in 97, 98 with PDVSA and how those events unfolded, I think they are an amazing opportunity for a case study. This is something that has to be studied by experts. I'm nowhere near qualified to even have an opinion on this, right? This is something that needs to be looked at. I think I would contend, and I would invite, if anybody out there has expertise on this, to look at these things. I mean, there's documents that are public, and people could come together. And I think there are platforms, open source platforms, where people come together and do kind of open source investigations, right, or research. If there's people out there that have interest in understanding these things, I would posit that this is an amazing opportunity to understand how is the CCP operates, because this is what they did, right? So they you know they created the PayPal mafia, right, with the help of Uncle Bill, and then they injected their technology that is really a backdoor into these important companies. But the thing is that they created the aggregator, right? Because they could have done this with the 5 companies before. They didn't need to really unify them, merge them, right? But this show, I think, at least to me, it is consistent with what I'm seeing with the technique of aggregating things, which is a weakness, right? Like, because as you can see, they are aggregating cases, for example, in the First Court of Appeals. And as I mentioned before, this thing that I'm doing with the distributed appeals will disarm that court. I mean, these cases should be routed to different justice. I have enough orders, and I can create enough appeals that I can send appeals to every single judge in that court, no problem, even more than 1 appeal per judge. And they will be cornered, because then they will have to start contradicting themselves among them, or they will have to grant the appeals. And if they grant the appeals, so I don't know, but I don't want to go back to the legal topic. What I want to tell you is that the use of aggregation as a weapon, right? That is that is the that is, I think, that is the most fundamental technology of what the CCP does, is aggregation. Um, and that's why the aggregators are important. So when I see what happened back in Venezuela in 97, 98, it seems to me that it's likely that what they did is that they create, because the aggregator didn't exist. There were 5 different companies, and and there were a lot of other events that unfolded after that point. Like they purged 20,000 people from the company, including me. Like, that's the reason why I fled the country. And I had to, I mean, they were harassing me with the military. Uh, and I went and asked for asylum in Canada. Um, but, if you think about it, right, it's the same. Like here, they're harassing me with the police of Fort Bend County, and with the courts. It's the same. It's a standardized procedure of a state. And when I say state, it's not Venezuela. Like Venezuela was captured by them. It's a state procedure of the Chinese, or the Russians. I don't know, right, which one of the two is that runs the police harassment. But it's coming from that side of the world. It's something from Asia, right, or Eurasia. Um, so I don't know. But what I want to tell you is that I think like analyzing what happened there, how they created the aggregator, who made those decisions. And this is interesting because, well, and then one of the other things that they did, and I talked about this in one of the books, is that when they pushed 20,000 or something people from the company, right? Many of them left the country, like me, for example. I'm one of those, one of 20,000 that left in that during those 2 years following that oil strike. But in that group, there were also people that were working for the network. Right? And what they did is that they positioned those in the highest possible executive positions they could in oil companies in North America and Canada. Because it was an opportunity. I mean, if there is such a wave of immigration coming from Venezuela, of professionals in this vertical, specifically of this industry, it's easy to pass, like to pass a few that are compromised, and it would be hard to see them. Um, so I guess, like this, I think, right, if this is analyzed in that context, it's possible that it could lead to detection of people that could have information, because these people are still alive. I mean, not that much time has happened. It's only 20 years. They are retired. They're not working in the oil company anymore, in the oil companies anymore. But some of them were, I don't know if CEOs, but like close to CEOs. Like some of them were put in the board of directors, and I know that because I know some of them personally, in the boards of directors of many oil companies in Mexico, the US, and Canada. So those people must know what happened. Right? They must know about all this, because um, or it's likely that they know, right? And they would have information of what happened. I guess, like, the most valuable thing, at least to me, would be what happened with Intesa. I mean, who were the people that were involved in that? Who were the people that were running this company owned by SAIC in Venezuela in '98? Because that's the thing, like, those people, you would never know their names. Like, I'm telling you this as a former employee of Petroleum of Venezuela. I would see the people from Intesa working, and but they were always like separate. Like they would never approach us or have lunch with us or exchange numbers or like nothing. Like it was like, and I think maybe this was by design, right? Because there was an agenda, and they needed to protect what was happening behind, the behind the curtains. So I don't know. This is one of the things where I wish I would have more information that I could offer you, but um, I think this requires like people that have access to ask questions, direct questions to people that were there, to see exactly how they did it. But the end result of this is that in a short period of 4 years, they pushed the company, they completely transformed the charter of the company, and it turned into an engine of corruption. Well, to the point where you see cases like Andrade, right? El Tuerto Andrade. What's his name? Um, I can't recall the first name. El Tuerto Andrade, right, in Miami, right? Or cases like Rincon here in Houston, where the corruption, the level of corruption is in the billions of dollars, thousands of millions of dollars. So I don't know. And another thing my mom told me today that I didn't know this is that Venezuela had an important patent back in the days, like that was created in the late 80s. It was something called orimulsion. That's how they call it. And it was a technology. It was really a revolutionary technology in the sense that it was something that wasn't done before. The problem they had is that there is a part in Venezuela, which is called the La Faja del Orinoco, that the oil is very heavy. It's so heavy that it's very hard to transport. Like it doesn't flow. Like in its natural state, it's so heavy, so the density is so high that it doesn't flow through pipes. So it's basically like it's almost solid, right? Um, so what they did, some engineers in Tebep came up with the idea of creating. They call it, I don't know, I don't know how to translate these terms into English, but they call it. Uh, I would say something like emulsion. Emulsion. I don't know how to translate it. It's basically a chemical, an element, or a compound, or a mix. I don't know. That if you add it to the oil, it makes it so that it mixes with water temporarily. So you can add, oil and water, or petroleum and water don't mix. Like if you have a recipient with oil and you put water on top, the water ends at the top and the oil at the bottom, and they don't mix. Like they don't dissolve. The oil doesn't dissolve in the water. It's not soluble. So what this component does, this magic thing that they created, is that it makes it soluble into water for a period of time. So you can basically dilute the oil, and then you can transport it that way through pipes and then through ships. And then when it gets to the other side, you can separate the oil from the water, and you can get again the high viscosity oil, which is very valuable because it's dense. It has other properties that the not so dense oil doesn't have. Anyhow, this thing was invented in Venezuela in the late 80s, and they got a patent, a worldwide patent for this thing. But after this thing on the 97, 98, and PDVSA went downhill, and Chavez took the country, and the Chinese started investing in the country. What happened is that Chavez gave the patent as a gift to, my mom thinks it's a Chinese. I don't know. I haven't checked. I have to check. I don't want to say something that is accurate, but he gave the patent as a gift to a foreign country. I imagine, looking at all these and Tyler Miller and the interesting patents of these people, I imagine it was a Chinese, right? So it's anecdotal, but I think it shows you, right, that the end goal of all this enterprise is stealing patents. That's what they do. I mean, that's more valuable to them than the oil itself. And we talked about before of why, right? Because these patents generate income forever, right? For the time that the patent is valid. It's a resource that doesn't um, you cannot run out of the patent, right? And you can run out of the time on the patent, but as long as you have the patent, you can monetize it. So that's probably why. It's more or less like what I have with the notice of infringement of the patents. Right? I can send these notices to anyone, right? And if it's an attorney, they would be forced to read it, and then they would be forced to report the crimes that are inside. I mean, that are documented inside of the book. So it's also an infinite weapon in a way. So I don't know. It's interesting that patents lead to infinity in this sense, right? Both for both sides. It's just interesting. Anyhow, so with that thought, I think I'm going to close this segment, and I'm going to process the videos and post them online. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you on the next one.